We are officially live. So, welcome to episode 12 of Asset Creators. I got a very special guest today, Kelsey. Kelsey, welcome.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to have you. So, if you guys don't know Kelsey or you're watching this and you do know Kelsey and maybe you don't know a couple of these things, I'm going to do a quick intro of her so you're kind of familiar with her background a little bit. So, Kelsey has spent the last 10 years interviewing people for newspapers, magazines, and now she helps business owners get visible online. And while doing this and all of that, she's also closed 1.7 million in revenue for her ghostwriting clients, and we can get into that. And she's also earned over $240,000 cash collected directly from social media content. So Kelsey is not a beginner. She's somebody who's had real results in the space. She's been at it for a while. So really grateful to have Kelsey on the show today.
Nice. I love it. Hell of an intro.
Oh yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I want this to flow fairly naturally, of course, but one of the things that I really think is important, if somebody who doesn't know you, besides just the intro I gave you, is to know a little bit about your origin story, right? And I know before this episode, we talked about, solopreneurship, what's the hardest part of it? And you said specifically the solo aspect is the hardest. So I would love to just jump into the moment you realized that and sort of how you got started in this solo game.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Canada, as did you, I believe, and I didn't really learn anything about being like financially independent. I think school kind of sets us up to like live the employee life, and then when you veer from that, you kind of already feel like you're on your own because you're like, man, I don't know how to do any of this. Like, I went to school and I thought I had all these skills, but then you get out in the real world and you're like, okay, I'm gonna make my own money. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to like be valuable to people. And so I think most of us now just instinctively start looking online and we start researching, how to build a business, and you watch YouTube tutorials. And I think you might get lucky and just like find your people right away. But I think what happens to most of us is it goes in the other direction, and you kind of start getting like analysis paralysis, and
Yeah.
you get conflicting advice from different people, and then you just end up being more confused. And I think that's the part where it gets really isolating. And then on top of that, like if you're not in a community of people that are also kind of going after the same things, I have very few friends, that I grew up with that are pursuing any kind of entrepreneurial path. So
Yeah.
even though you might have people in your life that like want to support you and want to see you win, they don't really get it. Like I have a lot of people in my life that I firmly believe would like breathe a sigh of relief if I just went back to a job, because it's just like what they know. So I think that's like the really kind of lonely part, is just feeling like I don't really know how to do this. I'm trying to figure it out. I get so much different advice from different people. And then on top of that, it kind of feels like everybody's trying to sell you something. So you don't really know who to believe, because everybody's going to talk up how like, their path is the path. So it can like, I noticed that in myself, that I started to develop like a bit of a skepticism of people, of like, does this person actually want to help me, or do they want to sell me and then help me? And so I feel like that became like a bit of a blurred line for me of like, who do I think actually sees a path for me and wants to help me get there? And who do I think just sees a potential paycheck in me? And I honestly don't know that I've like really gotten over that, but I've definitely found that as I've started putting myself out there more and just like sharing my journey and trying to be very raw and open about like the things that didn't work for me, and like I don't ever want to be somebody who only shares the success stories. I want to be somebody that shares like the real shit and is willing to share like when I'm in a rough spot, not just like, hey, here's how I got out of it, but like actually share when I'm in it as well. And maybe, some people might argue that that might lose me clients, but I just think it humanizes me. And in this very, very digital world of AI and people posting their highlight reels, I think people want to see that. And that's usually how I've ended up finding the people that I want to learn from. It's usually the people that I feel are also doing that. And they're just like being authentic, and, I feel a connection to them. And then I also see the results that they've gotten, and I trust them to want to invest in learning from them. So yeah, I think that's the part that I think is where a lot of people give up, is like in that phase of loneliness and not knowing who to trust and not really having that confidence in themselves yet. And I think a lot of people could succeed and like hit their big goals if they just found a way to keep going through that phase.
Yeah, that was great. And I think, of course, I'm sure in some way we've all experienced that in our own way, regardless if the story's a little different. But something you said that was really interesting was, of course, the skepticism. It's already online. It's a stranger, right? There's a lot of skepticism there. But for you, how do you feel like that skepticism you have has maybe been able to impact the way that you sell or you market yourself? Because chances are, if you've experienced that, a lot of your clients might as well, right?
Yeah, that I definitely took that into sales. And I think by some people's standards, like maybe I am not as good of a salesperson as I could be because I'm not as like, assertive, some people will call it, or pushy, or like if I don't, like, for example, I was doing high ticket sales for a business coaching program that I had actually gone through as a student. So when they asked me to help with the sales aspect of it, I was like, sure, because I had conviction in it. I used it to grow my business. I didn't feel like I had to like be phony or lie about it. And a lot of people in that role, the pressure sometimes is to just get people in the program.
Yeah.
But if I was talking to somebody and I didn't honestly think that this person was a good fit for the program, or if I didn't think that they actually wanted to like build their business, I would just be straight with them. And so I probably lost sales that like other people in that position might have closed, but I just never saw the point. I was like, I'm not here to just take people's money or just see them as a paycheck. And in some ways, I used to think that made me not as good of a salesperson because maybe I just got like too invested in the people that I talked to. But on the other side, I was like, I think that actually makes me better though. Like in my first year of doing that role, I hit like a 54% close rate, which I didn't know until much later was like pretty above industry standards for a high ticket offer.
Definitely.
And I think it's because like people could feel that I was just being real with them. And I specifically, I always think of this one call where the guy came to the call and he was just like pissed off and he was super skeptical. Like he felt like he'd been burned by other things before and was just kind of being a dick, honestly. And I was like, well, yeah, man, I'm not going to sell you into the program today. Like I'll give you the information that you came to the call for, but like you sound like you're pretty pissed off. You sound like you're not done being pissed off. So that's going to stop you from finding something that's actually going to work for you if you're going to come into it already assuming it's not going to work. So like, here's the info, but this probably isn't a good fit right now. And I think me kind of calling him on that was a little off-putting for him, but he acknowledged it and he kind of opened up about like the things he tried and, where he's at. And I was just like, every time I went into a call, I kind of had this mantra that I would remind myself of that, like, I'm not here to sell this person. I'm just going to see if I can help them. That's it. And that guy ended up joining the program. And I touched base with him like weeks later and he was like, this is the best thing I've ever joined. And he's built his business with it now. But I can't even remember what your original, like how that skepticism, I've kind of taken that into business.
Yeah.
I just always try to see people as like humans first. And I do a lot of like coaching people on like prospecting and getting their first clients because I found that's a really big bottleneck for people in starting their business. And that's like something I feel like I'm saying on repeat is like, just talk to people like they're a human being, not like they're a number on your spreadsheet, because people pick up on that energy. And if people feel like you are talking to them like a person and you genuinely are interested in helping them, they're going to be way more receptive to whatever you're saying, as opposed to if you come at them with like I'm trying to sell you energy.
Yeah. What a wild concept that speaking to people like humans, it will like differentiate you. It's it just goes to show the state of like the online game right now, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Absolutely. So that's good. That's a great story. And so just out of curiosity, when you were working and selling for them, were they recording your videos? Like, did they record all the sales calls and stuff like that?
They
Did,
record the calls, yeah.
did they ever like review yours and be like, hey, why didn't you sell this person? Or were they upset about that or no?
Yeah, I got told several times that like I could be firmer with people. That
Okay.
was always the term they used, is like you could be firmer. And I definitely got firmer over the years, in just that like I was willing to call people out. But the way that I took that feedback was like firmer to them meant like you need to like push people to join more.
Of course.
And I took that personally for a long time, and that like I wasn't doing a good enough job. But then when I actually started like looking at my numbers of like how many people joined through me, and how those people actually did when they got in the program, I was like, no, I stand by what I do. And
Nice.
I learned about like, like masculine styles of selling versus like feminine styles of selling. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, I'm generally more of a feminine person, and I'm just going to lean into this and stop trying to be like I don't know, who's that guy I'm thinking of? Not Gary Vee. I don't, his name is slipping my mind here for a second. Yeah, just not trying to sell like somebody else. And I think that's like where a lot of people go wrong with prospecting or sales or just trying to get clients, is like, you'll see somebody say like, hey, I closed this many deals this month and this is the script I used. And then so you think, okay, great, I'm going to take that script and I'm going to use it. But if it doesn't sound like you, and that's not how you talk, or it's not like how you actually do business, like don't be surprised if that script doesn't work for you, because you've probably heard the phrase before, like selling is a transfer of emotion, and people pick up on the emotion or the energy behind what you're saying. So you just have to find a way to like provide something that you actually stand by, that you actually believe is going to help this person, and then have conversations with people that you actually see a way to help them with it. And that will get you infinitely farther, for me at least, than like seeing it as a numbers game and just sending all these people the same copy and pasted script.
Damn. Okay, we're going into sales today too. I love it. No, that's great.
Hey,
Great
it's part of
advice.
business. It's a big part of
It's
business.
it's arguably one of the biggest. So cool. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing all that. I mean, that's great.
Yeah.
So moving forward, just like slightly based off what we were just chatting about, right? And we can just piggyback off all that. Is we're talking about this solo thing, and all of these things that come with being by yourself, right? Solo, especially early on. One of the things that you mentioned to me was like you feel like that stage of like feeling like you're on your own or whatever is the most important phase on the solo journey, or like the early stages when you're trying to like overcome these things, right? So I want to talk about that and why you really believe that that's the most crucial phase of being a solopreneur.
I think just because it's the phase that most people never get through. Like, when I think about even just like being a part of that program, which really was like an online business program for beginners, when I think about the amount of people that I've seen actually like get into it and use the program and even like get their first client, it's very low. And that's like a pretty like industry standard. Like I think statistically somewhere around like 90% of people who invest in like a coaching program never even finish it. Like they never even go through all the training.
Yeah.
And at first I didn't believe that stat, because I'm like, no way. Like no way people pay thousands of dollars and then just don't do it.
Of course.
But it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I don't think that most of the time it's because of like laziness or anything. I think most of the time it does come from like a lack of self-belief.
Yeah.
And I think if more people just learned how to like work on their mindset during that phase, and this is why I think so many people in business talk so much about mindset, like it really is everything. Because when you're going through that grind of like figuring out what you want to build and figuring out how to like, pay yourself enough to make rent, like that's the hardest phase to get through, is that like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing phase. And I think if more people were able to keep going like you and I did and get through that phase, even just to get like the very first client, like just to see yourself get that win. And like the first paycheck that I ever got was $500. It was not life changing, but I will never ever forget it, because that was the first moment that I was like, holy shit, I can actually do this. I can actually make money on my own. And like for most people, I think the very first client is like the biggest like momentum throttle. So that's like, I think if people could just hang on to get the very first client, I think we would see infinitely more people like actually hitting their goals and actually building businesses.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a huge point. I remember when I first landed mine, of course, and it was about 5 months I went without any clients, and I had some savings, so I was just focused. I believed in it. And of course, we've chatted about this before, but just like the way that it shatters your worldview, right? Because
Yeah.
when you hear of online business, like it sounds cool, it sounds great. Of course, there's some skepticism, like you kind of already mentioned. But when you start to do it yourself and you're like, I need to create this client out of thin air, it seems, it's daunting. And then you get that first client in and boom, like you see the money hit your account and you're like, this is real, right? So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's such an important part of the journey. And you're right. So many people give up before that point. Like I said, I was on my 5th month. I was obviously starting to have doubts, right? At that point. So because you mentioned the mindset, right? So I want to go more into that because I actually think that's a really important conversation. And not that this needs to be just a mindset call, but more specifically, like more granularly, what do you mean when you say they need to flip their mindset? Like, or you had to when you were there, right? Like, what specifically do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this is actually why we named our brand Inspired Idiots, because that's what it felt like.
Nice.
And I think at first people might hear that term and think it's like a negative, but that's exactly it. Is like when you are trying to create a life that's like a little bit different from what you see people around you doing, you feel like an inspired idiot. You're like, I feel deep down that my life can be what I want it to be. I feel deep down that I'm capable of working for myself and being financially free. Like I know those things are possible for me, but it's hard to believe it when I've never done it.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe it when like my parents, I don't feel get it, or my friends don't get it. Like you do really feel like you're a little bit delusional, and you kind of have to be like you have to have like a
Of course.
delusional self-belief that you're like, look, you guys don't have to understand it right now, but you will. And one day we will all look back and we'll say, thank God she didn't give up.
Yeah.
But when you're in it and you're going through it and you don't know how it's going to unfold, that's like exactly how it felt to me. I was like, I feel like an inspired idiot. And I think it comes from like, we all have this deep-seated fear of failure that I think, again, we kind of learn in school, because like we're taught in school that like failure is bad. Failure gets you held back. Failure, gets you looked down upon because you get bad grades and then you don't get as many opportunities. But then you get into life and you get into entrepreneurship and you have to completely flip that. You're like, I have no other way to do this than just to fail over and over and over
Yeah.
again. Because that's the only way that you
Yeah.
figure things out is by getting
Yeah.
it wrong. But there's a phase, and honestly, like I've been at this for almost 5 years, and I still have a bit of a fear of failure. Like I still have a fear of like, what if this doesn't work out? But you kind of just learn that like you have to just have fun with it. And that's like another kind of mantra that I say to myself often is like, let's just have fun with this. Like, let's just see what happens. We're going to figure it out either way. It's either going to go the way we want it to go, or it's not. And we're going to learn, and we're going to learn how to do it better. And that's like, if I had to say like, what is the one quality I've seen in the people who I've seen be successful at actually reaching their goals, they were just not willing to let failure stop them. And it's not that they weren't afraid of failure. Like they often are afraid of failing, but they just didn't let that stop them. They're like, yeah, I don't want this to fail. I don't want to waste all this money that I invested in this program, but like, I'm just going to figure it out. So that kind of became like the mantra for Inspired Idiots, is like, if you have some like big goal or some like, quote unquote, unrealistic thing that you're trying to do, you don't have to know how you're going to get there, because if you've never been there, of course you're not going to know.
Yeah.
You just have to tell yourself like, fuck it, I'm just going to figure it out. And if people could learn how to just embrace that mindset and kind of embrace being an inspired idiot,
Nice.
and just being like, yeah, I'm totally going to fail, but like, I'm going to figure it out. Like, that's really all you have to do.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. You got me fired up. Damn. So
That's the mindset.
yeah. So when we're talking about that, like a lot of that sounds like courage too, right? Just having courage, especially despite fear, taking action. And it's funny because entrepreneurship, of course, is you're going to fail more than you win. And you have to accept that going in. So for somebody who's watching this and maybe they're a solopreneur in their first couple of years, whatever, and they're thinking like, I get it. It sounds good, but like, I'm just not a courageous person. Like, what would you say to that person who feels like they just can't seem to muster up the courage? Would you say, oh, it's just not for you? Or would you say, hey, everyone has this. You just have to dig in and get it.
Yeah, this is funny. I actually wrote a newsletter about this last week, and it was like, I write a newsletter every week, but every once in a while, there's one that you write that you're like, this one feels so important. Like this one comes from like deep within. And it's this concept that I first thought of like years ago, and I've just kept coming back to it because I keep finding it to be true at different stages of my business, is that if you are trying to reach some big goal or you're trying to like change your life in any way, you have two options. You can ask questions or you can tell stories. So what you just said is a story that somebody would tell themselves of like, yeah, I want to do that, but I'm not courageous. Or like, yeah, I want to do that, but like it's harder for me because of XYZ or because of like this thing in my life or this thing I'm dealing with. And that is a story that you're telling yourself. And that's not to say that like, you know, the things that are going on in your life aren't challenging, or that's not to say that we're all created equal or we all have the same opportunities. Like there's definitely people out there that would just naturally have a harder time building a business than like maybe I did. But again, like if you're trying to do something you've never done, or you're looking at your life today and you're like, my life today is not what I really, really want it to be. I believe that it can be more of what I prefer. Then you have to recognize that you probably have stories about who you are and why you are the way you are that you've been subconsciously telling yourself for your entire life. And I think that entrepreneurship is kind of like the biggest mirror that you have to hold up to yourself, because you kind of have to start recognizing those stories that you have that are like self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
Like I come from a family of no entrepreneurs. Nobody in my family has ever like built their own business. It's, you know, in every phase of my journey, it would have been more comfortable to just go back to having a job. But I was like, well, fuck it. Like if other people can figure it out, I can figure it out. But there's a lot of stories that come up about like why it's hard or like, you know, XYZ. But again, you can either tell those stories or you can get curious, be like, okay, I feel like this is really hard for me because I really struggle with courage. How could I work on that? Is there somebody who I see their content a lot online that I could maybe reach out to them? Like, is there somebody in my life who seems to be really courageous? Could I like reach out to that person and like offer to buy them a coffee and just be like, I just want to ask you some questions about like how you go for big things? Like, could I watch a video on YouTube from somebody who teaches like how to be more courageous? Could I join some kind of coaching program? Like there's so many options, but you have to start getting curious about what you don't know, as opposed to being like, well, I can't have the thing that I want because of X reason. Because if you do that, that's the easiest mindset to get stuck in, is like, I can't have what I want because. I would argue then you maybe just don't want it bad enough, because I've seen so many people in like rock bottom positions. Like even like I know your journey, Darian, that like you went for a long time not making money, and you had people in your life being like, hey, like maybe you should get a part-time job. Mm-hmm. It would have been so easy in that scenario to just tell yourself stories about like, well, I guess I can't do it. You know, I guess it's just not for me. I guess like well, what am I supposed to do? I needed a job. But those would have been stories. But instead you were like, no, I'm going to figure out what I don't know. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to stay curious. And you figured it out.
Damn. Yeah, so true. And those beliefs too, right? The stories, the beliefs. It's so important to audit those all the time, because you just never know. It might be one little experience that happened when you were just a kid and it's just running in the background, right? One of the most common ones that I see, and we actually kind of chatted about this before we hit record or started to stream here, was the comparison trap, right? It's like, it's kind of human nature, of course, right? We're tribal by nature, But I find specifically for solopreneurs, that's one of the most dangerous traps. So I wanted to ask you sort of your experience with, the comparison trap, and also kind of if you were maybe not able to abolish it completely, because like I said, part of it is human nature, but how did you deal with it specifically?
Yeah, I've kind of come to believe that the comparison trap is the easiest to fall into when it's an area that you feel like you haven't figured out yet. Because, like, for example, I really struggled with like fitness for a really long time. Like, I had an eating disorder. I spent many years working out, kind of more out of like self-hatred than like what you would think like health and fitness is kind of supposed to be for.
Yeah.
And I really compared myself to other people. Like, I really compare myself to like other women in the gym, people who I thought looked better than me. I'd like be envious of people because I'm like, man, it just seems like it comes so easy to them. And like, I just can't figure it out. Like, I feel like I can't look the way I want without just being miserable or, having an eating disorder or whatever. And then, I spent years kind of working on my relationship with fitness and where that was coming from. And I found a coach who I felt like really understood me and like really made an effort to dig into my relationship with fitness. And I just learned, I was willing to accept that maybe I just didn't know everything. And I think I clung to that for a long time, that I was like, I know all this though. Like, I know all this. But I had to get to a point where I realized like, okay, well, obviously I don't know
Yeah.
everything because I'm out here exhausting myself and doing these unhealthy things and I still don't feel the way I want to feel. So maybe there's a lot that I don't know. Like, maybe I'm getting this wrong. And now, years later, I feel like I have a great relationship with fitness. And I've had people in my life say, like, you seem so much happier and you actually like eat all the foods and you like, look the
Nice.
best you've ever looked while eating all the foods. You're not like restrictive anymore. And I feel like I figured it out. So I really don't compare my body to other people's anymore because I feel really proud of mine. And I'm good. I'm good with me. But it took me a long time to get to this point and to feel like I figured out how to, I guess, like, quote unquote, like, be successful with my health and fitness. And then I got into business and I felt like I went through that all over again.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like this is, I mean, fitness as well, but like, it's really easy to see other people online and to be like, I want that. Like, they seem like they have it figured out. I want their success. Um, but I think what I've kind of learned in business, and this is actually what kind of drove me to start my interview show, was that there is a lot of smoke and mirrors when it comes to online business content and people kind of selling their success stories. And that it irked me for a little while, especially on platforms like LinkedIn, because I feel like I would see a lot of content from people being like, I hit 7 figures by the time I was 26 and it was easy. And here's my 7 productivity tips. And I had this like recurring thought in my mind often of like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what have these people figured out that I just cannot figure out yet? And I I don't know that I have like a perfect answer for this, but I just kind of got to a point where I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, that person's success has nothing to do with mine. And somebody else being successful doesn't take away from my potential success. And there's really nothing good that comes from me comparing where I'm at to where I perceive somebody else is at. Because the other side of that too is like, you really don't know what goes on behind the curtain of somebody else's business. Like, I've spoken to people before that were like, yeah, I did 250K in my business last year. And on paper, that sounds great. But then when I was actually talking to her about it, she was like, oh yeah, but my expenses were more than that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
somebody in that position could just go make a bunch of posts and be like, I did 250K in my business last year and just leave it at that. But I found a lot of times when you kind of see behind the curtain, not that that's always the case, but there's almost always more going on that person just might not be sharing. So I just kind of got to a point where I was like, I don't think that comparing myself to where I perceive other people to be is really ever going to serve me. I don't particularly find it to be motivating. If anything, it's demotivating. So I still will fall into that sometimes. It's like a instinctual reaction to see somebody who like achieved a milestone that I really want to achieve and be like, fuck, I want to get there. But I try to kind of instinctively just flip it now and think, okay, that's great for them. I'm happy for them. I'm just going to focus on getting 1% further than where I feel I was yesterday. And that doesn't always mean like that you close a client today. It could
Yeah.
mean that like yesterday I was trying to figure out this problem and today I'm still trying to figure it out, but I learned something today that I didn't know yesterday. So I am farther along on that path. And I think that's the best way to look at it. People say like, don't compare yourself to other people, compare yourself to where you were yesterday. That's how I see it, is like, am I even 1 inch further on my journey than where I was yesterday? And if the answer is yes, everybody else can do what they're doing.
Yeah. And it sounds like a lot of that is sort of shifting your relationship with wins as well. Like for you to be able to say, hey, you know what? I didn't sign a high ticket client yesterday, but I made progress in this, or I'm one step closer. Like a lot of people would not see that as a win. And so I think that's actually really important for people to understand too, is like not every win has to be grandiose and explosive. So cool. Okay. Yeah, that's great. Transitioning from that, because I think that's a perfect segue into one of the final questions I have for you, which is like, okay, we're working on the mindset. We're trying to get rid of this comparison trap, all of these things that we've already talked about that come with the solo business, right? For you personally, because I really think our stories are one of the most important thing. Like I know people who are going to watch this, they're going to care more about the story than just the tactics. Like you said, they could get on YouTube or they could Google, whatever, right? So like for you, Kelsey, what was the most important transformation that you went through specifically on your way to like fully support yourself? Because you and I have been at this. I've been at this for 4 years now. You've been at this for 5 years online. We're both full-time, all in. Like this pays our bills. This is what we do, right? So for the person who's like maybe still at a full-time or part-time job, but they really just want to go all in, for you, Kelsey, your story, what was that like for you, and what was the biggest transformation that you went through on that?
Yeah, I think that one of the most like standout pivotal moments in my journey was the first day that I earned more in an afternoon than what I used to earn at my 9 to 5 in like a full 2 week paycheck. And that's not me saying like, I hit $50,000 in one day. Like, I haven't closed those kinds of deal yet, but
Yeah.
I earned more in one afternoon than I would have earned in a 2 week paycheck. And that came after months of a dry spell. So like I went through a period where like my partner and I were just trying to like figure out how to build our business. And we had no income coming in. We were just draining our savings every month. There was a month, I think it was like March of 2022 or something, that I literally went to a pawn shop to sell some old like broken gold family jewelry. And I was like, sweet, this is going to cover our rent this month. And not a lot of people are willing to get to that point. And I think that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make here, is that,
Wow.
not even 6 months later, I think it was like, so that was in March. And then it was in like June or July that my partner and I were sitting on the deck in the backyard of his parents' place. And I was just like breathing it in, because I closed 2 deals that day. I earned like, I think it was like 1,500 US dollars. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I just earned more in the span of like 4 hours than I would have earned sitting at my job 8 hours a day for 2 full weeks. And it wasn't like I felt like I've made it, or like, like I can just stop everything now. But I just felt like something like unlocked in my brain. And I was like, my life can look totally different than what I've always thought it would. And like being somebody who never really felt right in the 9 to 5 life, like, even when I got a job that I was really excited about, I still just felt like, I don't feel like this is where I'm supposed to be though. Like going to an office every day and like sitting in a cubicle. I was like, I feel like I'm called to do more than this. So that day, like sitting out there in the back and just kind of breathing that in, it felt like all of a sudden, like the possibility was like unlocked for me, because I finally saw myself do it. Like to say that I earned more in
Wow.
4 hours than I used to earn in my job. I was like, man, like this is just completely shifting my beliefs on like what I'm capable of.
Totally.
So I've had, like I've grown my business to points that I'm very proud of, but there, for some reason, that afternoon will like always stand out to me because I feel like that's the moment that like the unlock happened. And I like truly believe that, not every day is going to be like this, but I know that it's possible now. And I think that was the moment that I just knew that I could never go back because now I knew what it could look like.
Yeah.
And I think if I ever tried to go back to like a 9-to-5 job after that, I just don't think I could because I think that something shifted in me that day and I'm just different now and I could never fit myself back into that again. But I really want to emphasize for your viewers that like that moment only came because I pushed through the 6 months that most people wouldn't push through. The 6 months of being like, okay, we got to take rent out of the savings again and like just, throwing yourself into something and being like, fucking hope this works. I'm going to make this work.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people would like cave to that pressure. And I just wasn't willing to. I was like, I'm going to figure it out no matter what. I believe that I'm capable of figuring it out.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. And honestly, just thanks for being so vulnerable throughout this whole conversation. I think people are going to take a lot from that because even like the fitness stuff you open up about, and of course, nobody wants to be at the pawn shop trying to sell something that was like maybe sentimental. But it just goes to show your commitment to making it work and figuring it out. And I think that's going to be one of the big takeaways for everyone. And, hopefully your audience sees this as well. It's like sometimes you just decide you're going to do something and no matter what happens, that decision is made. So you're sticking with it. So, wow. Thanks so much for that. So I got one final question for you and then we'll wrap it up. And this one's pretty simple, but it's a kind of a bigger, broader thing. But for all the solopreneurs who are watching this, who are, a couple years behind us, still trying to transition full-time, maybe they're full-time, but they're not quite making as much money, whatever. What's your final biggest piece of advice for them, right? And what they're struggling with, if they're struggling with any of the things that we've talked about, but just what's your advice you want to leave for solopreneurs who are, a few steps behind you?
Embrace being an inspired idiot.
Inspired idiot?
And that's, yeah. And I mean, like, I feel like when I say that, it's might sometimes just sound like I'm calling out my brand, but like, that's why I made it the name of my brand. Cause I honestly think it's like the best advice that you could give people. If you go into this and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that I can figure it out. I know that, maybe it feels like nobody really believes in me right now. I have days where I have a hard time believing in me. Like if you have never, like if somebody says, my goal for myself is to earn $10,000 a month. That's like a really, really common goal that I hear from a lot of people in the beginning. It's like the 10K month is a big milestone. But if you've never seen yourself do that, it's not crazy that you have a hard time believing in yourself to get there because that neural pathway doesn't exist in your brain yet. You've never seen yourself do it. All you have to do in the journey of getting there is believe that you are capable of figuring shit out. And you don't have to say to yourself, like, I fully, wholeheartedly believe I'm going to get to 10K because you might just not feel like that.
Yeah.
But you absolutely 100% have to believe that you're committed to the journey and you have to believe that you're capable of figuring shit out. And if you have that conviction and you're willing to just embrace being an inspired idiot, being like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I'm going to figure it out because I have this, unrealistic thing that I want to accomplish and I'm committed to the journey of figuring it out. That's all you got to do. And I promise you that will get you infinitely farther than like any productivity hack that you see on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. And yeah, the rest is just time, right? You commit to it, you do it, and then time. And hey, no worries about any plugs on the Inspired Idiots. Anyone who's watching this, go sign up. I will put a lot of your links in under the post or whatever, and you can just tell me what links you want there. But definitely go sign up to her newsletter. Go follow Kelsey if you're not following Kelsey. But other than that, thanks so much for being here, Kelsey. This has been a great conversation, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right. With that being said, that is it for episode 12. Thanks so much for being here. I will see you in episode 13.